Now here in Job 28, Job of course lived about probably over 3,500 years ago, probably before the time of Moses, and yet he is well acquainted with the topic of mining. Let's start reading in Job 28 verse 1. Surely there is a mine for silver and a place where they refine gold. So Job, even though he lived so long ago, knew about gold and silver mines and refining and smelting and all of that kind of thing. And he's going to tell us about how men have been very skilled at finding these very valuable earthly treasures. Let's read on. In verse 2, iron is taken from the dust and copper is smelted from the rock. And you might think to yourself, well, how did people so long ago, over 3,500 years ago, know all about iron and copper and gold and silver and so on? Well, keep your finger there in Job 28 and let's go back for a moment to Genesis chapter 4. Because almost right from the beginning, people were skilled and familiar with these kinds of metals and so on. In Genesis 4 verse 22, we're told there about a fellow called Tubal-Cain. And we're told there that he was the forger of all implements of bronze and iron. So there, right near the beginning, you see, they were dealing with bronze and iron and so on. This wrong view of the world that evolution has, that we're all sort of at the beginning cavemen trudging along with our clubs and so on before we finally developed it today, that's a wrong view of the society. God created man and woman in the beginning and they were very intelligent. And if anything, society's got weaker over time and less aware of God and his creation around them. But here you see right at the beginning they were dealing with these metals, and now if we go back to Job 28, this is what Job's talking about how we've got silver mines and iron mines, and the gold can be smelted and the copper smelted from the rock and so on. Let's go to verse 3. Let's have a look at this process of mining. Man puts an end to the darkness, and to the farthest limit he searches out the rock in the gloom and the deep shadow. And we're all familiar with that, aren't we? The miner goes down into the deep and the dark. He's got his lantern or his torch to try and show the way. But as Job says here in verse 3, it's a place of gloom and deep shadow. And he's got to try and put an end to the darkness with his torch. In verse 4, again, well, let's see a bit more about this process of mining. He sinks a shaft far from habitation, forgotten by the foot. They hang and swing to and fro far from men. Now that's a nice picture of mining, isn't it? First of all, the shaft is usually far from habitation. These people go out usually into deserted regions. I mean, the show I referred to earlier on 7 Mate, the Aussie opal hunters, they go out in the back of nowhere. And all you see is just an expanse of nothing, just a bit of dry ground with the occasional stump of a bush. And they go out there far from habitation, you see, it says here according to Job, forgotten by foot, and they hang and swing to and fro. That's a nice picture, isn't it? When the miner drops his shaft and he drops his rope down there and he goes down by the rope, you can picture him swinging and swaying as he goes down the shaft to go and search for this precious metal. Let's read on, verse 5. The earth, from it comes food, and underneath it is turned up as fire. Well, we know that man is intelligent and clever. We're able to cultivate the earth and get food from it. But underneath, you see the earth is turned up as by fire. And I'm not quite sure what Job's referring to there. Is he talking about the fire that smelts the iron and the metal from the ore and so on? Or is he talking about men are like a fire that goes through and ravages underneath the earth, digs tunnels everywhere to get the precious metals and so on? I'm not sure what he's talking about there, but the picture is certainly of this miner and this process of mining. Let's read on, verse 6. Its rocks are sources of sapphires, and its dust contains gold. You see, man's clever enough, and woman, to be able to delve and dig in these paths and find precious metals like gold and precious stones like sapphires. Let's keep going. verses 7 and 8. What about the animals? Are they as clever as man? Well, no. Let's have a look at verse 7. The path no bird of prey knows, nor has the falcon's eye caught sight of it. The proud beasts have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. You see, the miner's path that goes through the earth, not even the falcon with its keen eyesight has seen a path like this through the earth. And not even the proudest of animals like the lion would dare go down these shafts and tunnels in the earth. I mean, a lion will use a natural cavern in a cave, I assume, for a lair. But a lion won't descend shafts and go through tunnels underground. Hasn't seen this kind of thing that man is clever enough to do. Let's keep going. In verse 9, he puts his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the base. Now, the flint, of course, was a very hard rock. But you see, men are skilled enough and women are skilled enough to be able to chop through even the hardest of rocks. And it says there they overturn mountains. You know, man is capable enough of upsetting even mountains in their search for these precious stones and precious metals. Let's keep going. Verse 10. He hews out channels through the rocks, and his eyes see anything precious. Now, the King James there, if you're using the King James Bible this morning, has he hews out rivers from among the rocks. And it might be a reference to the way that miners are very skilled in running off water from where they want to dig, getting rid of water. But regardless of what exactly is being referred to here, he cuts channels through the rock. They're able to chip and chop through the rock, you see, and excavate and find all of these precious treasures and precious metals. And notice the end of verse 10. His eyes see anything precious. Nothing escapes his notice. Even when they're putting in side channels, I saw the show the other night, the Aussie opal hunters. They were going in one direction, and a fellow said, "Oh, let's try behind us. You never know." And blow me down, they dug behind, and there was this rich vein of opal that they just stumbled upon. You see, they don't miss things that are precious, as Job indicates here. Notice verse 11. He dams up the streams from flowing, and what is hidden he brings out to the light. So again, you see it might have a reference to water in the tunnel. They're skilled at preventing water from flooding the tunnels. It might even be a reference to surface water, where they can dry up streams and examine the riverbed for gold and whatever else. But you see, Job gives us a very detailed description of mining. And this is over 3,500 years ago. And you'd have to admit that man is very clever and very intelligent and very capable in finding the very precious things of this earth. But as successful as man has been in mining, he has been very unsuccessful somewhere else. And where is that? Well, let's have a look at Job 28 verse 12. Job 28 verse 12. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Now, that's almost a letdown, isn't it? After we see this great description of man and his ability to tunnel even under the earth to find all of this precious and valuable things, the question is asked by Job, but where's wisdom? Where can understanding be found? And in fact, if you have a look at the next verse, man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. It's not found in the land of the living. And that's what I've entitled the lesson this morning. Wisdom is not found in the land of the living. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, or what Job is saying. Job's not saying that there's no wisdom at all in the world. What he's saying is that it doesn't come from man. Man can't find that wisdom. As we go on in the chapter, he's going to point out to us, unless God gives us that wisdom, we're lost. We can't find it out. So the heading for today is, wisdom is not found in the land of the living, Job 28 verse 13. We can find marvellous things in the land of the living. We can find sapphire and gold and silver and all kinds of precious stones and metals, but wisdom is not found in the land of the living. And what kind of wisdom is Job referring to here? Well, he's not talking about worldly wisdom is he? He's just told us about the miner. The miner's very wise and very skilled in tunnelling and digging and finding precious metals. We're not talking about that kind of wisdom. The wisdom we're talking about here is the wisdom of God. The wisdom that God uses in his creation, in making the world. And he's also referring to the spiritual wisdom that all of us need to know if we're going to please God. We'll cheat a little bit this morning and jump to the very last verse of the chapter, Job 28, verse 28. To man he has said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. We're going to jump to that very quickly to see that when we ask the question, or when we're talking about this wisdom, it's not found in the land of the living. We're not talking about human wisdom. That is evident in the world, but we're talking about God's wisdom, the wisdom he used to make the world, the wisdom that he has given to us about how we can please him. And so let's go back to Job 28, where we got up to. Let's go to verse 12 again. Where can wisdom be found? It can't be found in this world. Man can't find it. It has to be given to us by God. And Job wasn't alone in making this point. Again, if you'll keep your finger in Job 28, and let's cross it to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul made a similar point. Let's go across to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. We're told in this section, by the way, verse 24 and so on talks about Christ being wisdom from God. We're not going to touch on that just at the moment, but notice verse 21. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 21, since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God. Can you see what Paul's saying there? The world in its wisdom. Even though the world is very wise and we're able to find very much precious gold and silver and gems and so on, the world in its wisdom didn't come to know God. That's what Paul says. And Paul has to go on and say, well, the wisdom that has come from God is in Christ Jesus, and that's how we know what true wisdom is. Let's go back to Job 28, because back here in Job 28, in verse 13, we're told here, man does not know its value. This wisdom that we're talking about, man doesn't know its value. You can't put a price on it. If we're talking about Jesus as the wisdom of God, what's he worth? Is he worth $1,000? Is he worth $1 million? Is he worth $1 trillion? You see, we can't put a price on it. And that's what Job is saying here. Man does not know its value. We can't put a price on it. The price of wisdom just transcends whatever figure we might think to put on it. And notice again verse 13, where the title of the lesson has come from today. In verse 13 at the end there, it isn't found in the land of the living. God's wisdom, the wisdom he used to make the world, the spiritual wisdom that we all need to know, you can't dig holes for it. You can't channel deep and find it. Only God can give you that wisdom. And so again, let's continue on. Job 28, let's go down to verse 14. The deep says, it is not in me. And the sea says, it's not with me. So we've seen how men can dig in the earth and go down deep, but even the sea, if we're able to go down the bottom of the sea and even dig in the bottom of the sea, even there you couldn't find this wisdom that we're talking about, Job says. And then notice verse 15. Pure gold cannot be given in exchange for it. And so he goes on. And I've made a bit of a summary here to try and save us a bit of time this morning, but in verses 15 to 19, he lists a whole lot of precious metals and gems. Pure gold can't be given in exchange for it. Silver can't be weighed for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold or glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for articles of fine gold. Coral and crystal are not to be mentioned, and the acquisition of wisdom is above that of pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. Now, a lot of those things, the translators are not exactly sure of what they're referring to, and you can see it if you compare different translations. But that's irrelevant, isn't it? Because the point is very clear that nothing can be given in exchange for this wisdom. No matter how valuable it is, you can't buy this wisdom. You can't get this wisdom with these kinds of things. And notice here that Job mentions pure gold, the gold of Ophir, gold, articles of fine gold, and pure gold. He's not forgetting himself here. It doesn't come across in our English translations, but the Hebrew word for gold here is different than the Hebrew word for gold down here. So what Job is saying is it doesn't matter what kind of gold you've got, whether it's the ordinary gold, or whether it's the pure gold, or whether it's the gold of Ophir, which was supposed to be the best gold in those days. It doesn't matter which gold, or even a less valuable substance like silver. It doesn't matter, precious stones, sapphire, it doesn't matter what you've got. Nothing can be given in exchange for this marvellous wisdom that Job is talking about. Turn with me for a moment to Proverbs chapter 3, because we find in Proverbs a similar point being made. In Proverbs chapter 3, let's read from verse 13. How blessed is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her gain better than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. Exactly the same point Job made, that this wisdom is just beyond value. Nothing can be given in exchange for it. It's so important and so valuable. And so let's go back to Job 28. Job's talked about the miners in verses 1 to 11. They find some marvellous things, but they don't find wisdom. And then in verses 12 onwards, he's asked the question, where can wisdom be found? And he's pointed out you can't try and pay for it, even with valuable things, because it can't be exchanged for even these valuable things. It's more valuable than that. And then we get to verse 20, where he asks the question again. Where then does wisdom come from, and where is the place of understanding? You can't dig for it. You can't dig for it and find it in the earth. You can't give all of these valuable things that come out of the earth for it. So again, you see, he asks the question, where is this wisdom? Where can you find it? And again, let's have a look here at verse 20. In verse 20, he goes on to say, verse 21, it is hidden from the eyes of all the living. It is concealed from the birds of the sky. Birds have keener eyesight than men and women a lot of the time, don't they? And yet even they can't see this wisdom, Job is saying. It's not a natural attainment of this world, is what he's trying to point out. It's got to come from God. If it doesn't come from God, it's not the wisdom that we're talking about in this passage. Down in verse 22, Abaddon and Death say, with our ears we have heard a report of it. Abaddon and Death seems to be a reference to Sheol, to the place of the dead. Even when people die, there's a rumour of it, but that's all. And so again, the point Job seems to be making, it doesn't matter whether you're in the land of the living or in the land of the dead even, this wisdom can't be found. Can't be found, that is, unless God gives it to us. And so just when you're in this chapter of Job 28, and just when you're at the point of despair, because it seems like this wisdom can't be found in the land of the living, notice verse 23. God understands its way and he knows its place. Isn't that marvellously reassuring? That while we can't find this wisdom, and that even the dead don't have much idea about it, God knows all about it. This is where the poem that Job gives us reaches its climax, doesn't it? We can't find wisdom, but God knows where it is. He knows all about this wisdom. He knows about the physical wisdom that He used in creating the world around us. He knows about the spiritual wisdom that He's going to tell us about, that we need to follow to please Him. God knows and God understands. And we can understand it if we listen to God. Here's what Job is going to go on and point out for us. Notice verse 24. He looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under it. If you remember with people can see a lot of things. Back in verse 21, we're told there back in verse 21 that the birds can't see wisdom. We're told back in verse 10 that man's eye sees anything precious. But here in verse 24 you see God sees everything from the ends of the earth. So God, of course, knows about wisdom, and God can give us this wisdom that people should be searching for. And then as we go on in verses 25, 26 and 27, Job gives us just a few examples of the great wisdom of God in the world around us. And all of us can acknowledge this, can't we? He talks about four things in particular. He talks about the wind, the waters of the earth. He talks about the rain that falls and the thunderstorms, the thunderbolt. So let's read from verse 25. Verse 23, God knows wisdom. Verse 24, God sees everything. Verse 25, when he imparted weight to the wind and meted out the waters by measure, when He set a limit for the rain and a course for the thunderbolt, then He saw it and declared it. He established it and also searched it out. God, you see, has already shown us wisdom in this creation around us. In the wind, notice He gave weight to the wind. I mean, you think for a moment, well, wind doesn't weigh anything, does it? But I don't think that's what it's saying. He gave weight to the wind. He gave force to the wind, you see, so that the wind can do what it's supposed to do on this earth. He gave force to the wind. He weighed out the waters by measure. Isaiah 40 verse 12 talks about He measured the waters in the hollow of His hand. Now, that's beyond comprehension, isn't it? You think of all the oceans and the waters in the world, and He measured it out by the hollow of His hand. I mean, what does that tell us about the greatness and the wisdom of God? Job goes on to talk about the rain that falls that we take for granted too often. It's only in the last few months when we've missed out on a bit of rain we start to wonder, where's the rain gone? But God sends the rain and shows His wisdom. And also in the thunderbolt. In fact, you might remember Genesis 1. After God had created the world, we're told in verse 31, God saw all that He had made, and behold, it was very good. You see, Job's just given us a few instances of where God's wisdom can be readily seen in this world. We can't find it. Doesn't matter how deep we dig. We can't find this wisdom. We can only find it insofar as God has shown it to us and declared it to us. And so let's go down to the last verse again. We sort of cheated a bit earlier on by coming to this verse, but have a look here. To man He has said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil, that is understanding. Finally we get to the answer. The question has been asked, where is wisdom found? It's not found in the earth. You can't pay for it with expensive things. Where is wisdom to be found? Well, the climax was God knows about it. But now here comes the answer. He's told us what wisdom is, and we should be listening very carefully to what He says. And notice what He says, that which is undiscoverable by human man, that which is unpurchasable by whatever we might offer, here it is. God tells us what it is. Fear God and depart from evil. That's the wisdom that He wants us to know. Marvellous little chapter, this one, isn't it? In Proverbs 2 verse 6, we're told that the Lord gives wisdom. From His mouth come knowledge and understanding. And we've already talked about 1 Corinthians 1, where Christ has come down to the earth and He has become wisdom from God. He's told us more about this wisdom that we need to know, which basically is, as Job has said here, fear God and depart from evil. There's the wisdom that all of us need to know. You might remember that the The man Job himself had this wisdom. Let's go back to the beginning of the book of Job, Job chapter 2. He was a man that was possessing this wisdom he talked about. In Job chapter 2 verse 3, the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man." Now notice this: fearing God, turning away from evil. And he still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin him without a cause. You see, there is the secret to life. There's the wisdom that you can't find down in a mine, that you can't even pay for in precious items. The wisdom is simply fear God and keep his commandments. And isn't that what Solomon wrote at the end of Ecclesiastes? The end of the matter when all has been heard? Fear God and keep his commandments. In Proverbs 14 verse 16 we're told, "A wise man is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is arrogant and careless." Let's be wise people with the wisdom from God. Let's do exactly as God has said. Fear him and turn away from evil. And so the lesson today has been about wisdom is not found in the land of the living. I mean, men and women are very wise. They can find a lot of precious things in the land of the living. Mining shows us that. But they can't find the wisdom that we need, the wisdom that God possesses, the wisdom that God wants to share with us about how to please him. It doesn't matter what they give in exchange for it. They can't find that wisdom unless God declares it to us. And so today we should be very grateful because God has declared to us that wisdom. Fear him, turn away from evil, listen to his son Jesus, who has become wisdom from God now, 1 Corinthians chapter 1. But before we leave Job 28, there's something that Job hasn't mentioned that I think should be mentioned. Let's go across to Revelation. In Revelation chapter 22, the very end of the book of Revelation, the very end of our Bibles as they're laid out. In Revelation 22, notice here verse 17. At the end of verse 17, "Let the one who is thirsty come." Let the one who desires, you see, to have the wisdom from God, let them come. Let the one who wishes to take the water of life, the water of life, you see, that leads to life with God in heaven forever rather than perishing in hell. If you want to come, you see, for that kind of water of life, the invitation is extended here in Revelation 22 verse 17, but what I'd like you to notice in particular is let the one who wishes to take the water of life without cost. Without cost. Isn't that lovely? Now Job didn't mention that, but I think we should mention it because although Job has made the point that this wisdom is so valuable that you can't give anything in exchange for it, what we need to realise is that God has made it known to us without cost. We don't need to pay for it. We don't need to give him anything for it. All we need to do is accept it and live our lives according to it. Fear God and turn away from evil. What a lovely gift God has given us the world, and in particular in his son Jesus, who is wisdom from God. This morning, if you're listening to this lesson and you're not yet a Christian, we'd urge you to become a Christian in the way that Jesus himself has outlined. Let's turn to Mark chapter 16. A lot of people in this world will tell you a lot of strange things about how to be saved, how to become a part, how to share in this wisdom. Job's already indicated that we need to fear God and turn away from evil. Well, Jesus, the wisdom from God, elaborates a bit more on this. Let's go to Mark 16 verse 16. Jesus says, "He who has believed and has been baptised shall be saved." So we've got to believe in Jesus and we've got to be baptised in order to be saved. That's not me telling you that. That's what Jesus himself said. He who believes and is baptised will be saved. That's not the end of the matter, of course. Once you're baptised, you're immersed in water, then you need to keep on, as Job has said, fearing God and turning away from evil, living according to the teachings that Christ has given us in this New Testament. And so if you're listening to this lesson this morning, wisdom can be found. It can be yours if you believe in Jesus and are baptised for forgiveness of your sins. If you're here this morning and you've already done that, then let's remember this marvellous message from the book of Job. That what we have in our hands here in the New Testament is the greatest wisdom this world has ever known. We do know other forms of wisdom. Of course, the miner is very clever and crafty. But this is the greatest wisdom the world has ever known. Far valuable than gold or silver or precious gems or whatever. Let's make sure that we always cling on to it and remain faithful. Let's not forget this chapter of the book of Job. It's almost being like a miner, isn't it? Digging into the book of Job and finding in the middle this marvellous chapter. But let's realise that wisdom is not found in the land of the living. We can't devise it. We can't come up with it. We can only listen to God and to the ways that He's outlined. Let's think on these things now as Carl leads us in the last song.